Welcome to Echoes of Time. Before we begin, one thing must be said. In our previous episode, we explored the origins, how the gods emerged in Mesopotamian myth, how the Igigi rebelled, and how humanity was created as a result. If you watched that chapter, you know the spark that started it all, but if you didn't, don't worry. You don't need to know how the story started to understand the terror of how it almost ended. Because today, we are leaving the creation behind and going somewhere far deeper. This episode is not about why humanity was born. It is about why humanity was nearly erased. Across Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, the Hebrew scriptures, the Book of Enoch, Hindu epics, Maya codices, Aztec legends, Greek myths, and even the oral traditions of Siberia and the steppe, one memory repeats. There was a world before the flood. And it was not like our own. A world described as vibrant, unstable, extraordinary, and doomed. But before we can understand the flood, we must understand the world it swept away. So what was this world? Who lived in it? Who didn't? And what was happening on Earth that would lead almost every ancient culture to insist that age had to end? Let's begin where the oldest clay tablets speak, Sumer. But before we descend into those texts, there is one more truth we must remember. Throughout early human history, civilizations were born beside water, rivers, deltas, coastlines, fertile floodplains. The cradle of humanity was always wet, and that choice made ancient societies powerful and unbelievably fragile. Even a regional tsunami, even a sudden sea rise, even a river that abandoned its course overnight could erase an entire culture, silencing it so completely that archaeology would recover nothing but mud and memory. So when dozens of civilizations describe a flood that ended the world, the question is not, could it have happened? The question is, how many times did it happen? Every civilization remembers an age before the flood, but none describe it in ordinary human terms. Sumer calls it the era of the Great Ones. The Hebrew book of Genesis speaks of Nephilim, beings of immense strength. The Greeks remember the age of Titans. India recalls the Devas and Asuras warring across the sky. The Maya speak of an early creation that failed, populated by beings who were powerful but incomplete. Different names, different myths, same pattern. An age when the boundary between the human and the divine was thin, and when rulers were not simply kings, but something more. The Sumerian king list, one of the oldest historical documents on Earth, makes a bold claim. Before the flood, the kingship descended from heaven. And those kings did not rule for decades. They ruled for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. The tablets present these reigns as literal. Why? Why would ancient scribes describe rulers whose lives stretch beyond the span of civilizations? Either they were exaggerating, or they were trying to preserve a memory from a world that no longer exists. A world where lifespans were different, power was different, hierarchy itself was different, a world that felt non-human. And yet, across all these myths, one detail stands out. This age was unstable, magnificent, yes, but fractured. Divine beings disputing power, humans caught in their conflicts, rival kingdoms rising and collapsing in patterns too large for archaeology to fully recover. It was an age that seemed unsustainable, a world running on borrowed time. Nearly every mythology insists the old order could not survive, and somewhere in the midst of this age of giants and immortal kings, the first signs of a world-ending disaster began to appear. Flood myths do not begin with rain. They begin with warning signs. Every culture describes a world that was collapsing long before the water came. In Sumerian texts, the gods argue. In the Book of Enoch, the earth groans under the weight of corruption. In Hindu tradition, humanity enters an age of decline, adharma rising. The Maya speak of a creation that becomes unstable, no longer listening to its makers. And the Aztec codices describe suns, entire eras being destroyed and replaced. Different words, same anxiety. Something was coming. But here is the part the myths do not say explicitly. The part archaeology reveals. There was not one disaster. There were many. Sediment cores show sudden sea surges along ancient coastlines. Ice Age meltwater floods carve canyons in an instant. Earthquakes reshape rivers overnight. Volcanic winters turn sky to ash. Mega tsunamis spread sand hundreds of kilometers inland. And these events do not line up to a single year or even a single century. They cluster, they echo, they compound. Civilizations weakened by one catastrophe fall to the next. A city destroyed by an earthquake is left vulnerable to famine. A famine weakens defenses against invading tribes. A tsunami wipes out the survivors along the coast. A chain reaction, not a moment, a process. And as these pressures rose, the ancient world began to interpret them through the only lens they had: cosmic imbalance. The gods are angry. The heavens are disturbed. The earth itself is rejecting the age of giants and long-lived kings. Myths describe this era not as a decline, but as a reckoning. A world stretched too thin, a hierarchy that no longer held, a creation that had diverged from its intended path. And somewhere within this spiraling instability, a decision is made. Not by humans, not by kings, but by forces the ancient world called gods. For the first time in the story, the myths converge. The world will be washed clean. The myths do not agree on everything. They disagree on names, on faces, on motives. But they all describe a moment, a turning point, when extraordinary beings decide that the world cannot continue as it is. In the Sumerian ATRAHASIS tablets, the gods gather in secret council. The world is overflowing, noisy, unruly, unsustainable. Humanity, once created to serve divine labor, now threatens cosmic order itself. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers have broken the boundary between heaven and earth, and their offspring, the Nephilim, bring chaos and violence across the land. The earth cries out, and the heavens answer. In the Hebrew tradition, every inclination of man's heart had turned to corruption. Violence filled the world. In Hindu texts, the end of an era approaches, a yuga collapsing under its own moral weight, dharma fading, chaos rising. And in Mesoamerica, the gods declare that an early version of humanity is flawed, incapable of honoring creation. They decide to erase it and begin again. Different languages, different cosmologies. Same verdict. This world cannot stand. But here is where the story sharpens. The flood is not described as punishment. Not truly. Certainly not in the simplistic sense modern retellings imply. In the oldest sources, the flood is a reset, a violent return to equilibrium. A malfunctioning system must be restarted. A corrupted creation must be cleared. The gods, or whatever these ancient cultures believed guided the world, look upon the age of giants, kings, demigods, and fractured humanity, and decide, let it end. And so a plan is set in motion. Quiet at first, hidden. Storms begin gathering along distant horizons. The deep teeters. Rivers rage. Signs appear, interpreted by priests, by sages, by terrified kings who understand too late what is approaching. The decision has been made. What remains is only the question the myths never stop asking. Who, if anyone, will survive? If the flood was a reset, then every culture faced the same question. Who will carry the world into its next age? And here the myths converge again, not in identical details, but in a shared pattern so precise it almost feels like memory. The oldest written flood story we have does not come from the Bible. It comes from Sumer, inscribed in cuneiform thousands of years earlier. ZIUSUDRA, a king and priest, receives a warning not from a wrathful deity, but from a whisper through a reed wall. A subtle encoded message from a god who does not agree with the coming destruction. Build a great vessel, he is told. Seal it against the waters of heaven and earth. He obeys. In the later Akkadian version, ZIUSUDRA becomes ATRAHASIS, and the story gains sharper edges. Humanity is too numerous, disturbing the gods with its constant noise. But one god, Enki, refuses to let humanity perish. Again, he whispers. Again, a man listens. Again, the vessel is built. In the Hebrew narrative, the corruption is moral rather than cosmic. Violence spreads across the world. Humanity loses its way. But the pattern repeats. One man is chosen, given knowledge no one else receives, and instructed to build a structure unlike anything his world has ever seen. And in India, the story unfolds differently, yet identically. A small fish warns Manu of an oncoming deluge. He nurtures it, protects it, and when the fish grows enormous, it reveals its true nature. A divine being preparing him for the end. Build a boat, it tells him. Fasten it to me. When the waters rise, I will lead you to safety. Different continents, different languages, different religions. Same sequence. A warning, a chosen survivor, a divinely guided vessel, a world-ending flood, a new beginning. Mythologists call this an archetype, but an archetype this specific, repeating across civilizations that never met, raises a deeper question. What happened to the ancient world that so many cultures remember the same way? Yet there is an even stranger layer, one that rarely appears in popular retellings, but is present in the oldest sources. In Sumer, after the flood, wisdom is restored by the Apkallu, 7 sage-like beings said to re-establish order. In Egypt, Thoth teaches laws and writing to the survivors. In India, after Manu lands upon the mountain, he receives instructions that shape the next humanity. Even in Greek myth, after the cataclysm, Themis guides Deucalion and Pyrrha in repopulating the world. The pattern deepens. The survivors are never left alone. Knowledge returns to them. Order is rebuilt through guidance, not by gods ruling from the sky, but by culture-bearing figures arriving in the aftermath. The flood ends an age, but it does not leave a vacuum. Humanity is meant to continue. And so the vessel lands, the waters fall, the sky clears. But the world the survivors step into is not the one they left behind. It is quieter, emptier, waiting for what comes next. Every flood story reaches the same moment, the boundary between the old world and the new, a line drawn not in sand, but in water. For the survivors, ZIUSUDRA, ATRAHASIS, Noah, MANU, the signs intensify before the first drop ever falls. Winds shift, animals behave strangely. The horizon darkens in ways it never has before. Thunder grows, not natural thunder, but a deep, resonant vibration described by ancient texts as the cracking of the world. In the Sumerian version, the fountains of the deep burst open, a phrase scholars still struggle to interpret. Was it groundwater rupture, tsunami shockwaves, a collapsing coastline, or a poetic memory of something too large to describe literally? In the Hebrew account, the windows of the heavens open. Rain becomes a weapon. Skies become oceans. In Hindu tradition, the waters rise not from anger, but from necessity. A cosmic cycle completing itself. And in Mesoamerica, the gods do not merely send rain. They unweave creation, dismantling a world that no longer fits the pattern of order. But behind these mythic phrases lies a geological truth. Floods rarely begin with water. They begin with instability, earthquakes, volcanoes, rapid ice melt, megatsunamis, atmospheric chaos, events that trigger one another. A chain reaction across regions, compressing centuries of disaster into a memory that feels like a single day. Imagine a coastline where an enormous landslide displaces the sea. Imagine a river system choked by sediment until it bursts its banks. Imagine a glacier breaking apart, releasing a lake held back for thousands of years. Imagine all of these occurring within the span of a few generations. What survives such an age? Not the cities, not the monuments, not the fragile technologies of early humanity. Only the stories. And those stories describe the moment the waters finally arrive. Rains that do not end. Winds that howl without breathing. Skies blackened at noon. Oceans that surge forward like living creatures. Rivers reversing their flow. Mountains echoing with a deep, impossible roar. The survivors do what the myths say they must. They seal their vessels. They shut the doors. They hold their breath. And the world outside disappears. The old age is ending. The waters have risen. The myths do not linger on the violence of the flood. They linger on the silence that follows. For 40 days and nights in the Hebrew account, for 7 days of storm in the Sumerian tablet, for an age-long deluge in Hindu cosmology, the world enters a darkness unlike anything humanity had known. Not the darkness of night. Night ends. This darkness does not. Inside their sealed vessels, the survivors listen to the sounds of a world unmaking itself. Water pounding like war drums. Winds that scream like living things, the groaning of timber, the snapping of mountains, the hollow echo of cities collapsing in the deep. And then, stillness. A stillness so complete every flood myth tries to describe it, and none fully succeed. No land, no sky, no horizon. Only water stretching into infinity, reflecting nothing. The Sumerian tablets say, all of mankind had turned to clay. The Hebrew text calls it the undoing of creation. In Hindu tradition, the boat of Manu floats across a cosmic ocean. The universe returned to its primordial state. And in the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the gods look upon the water-covered world and call it the night of the first age. A night with no stars, no birds, no voices. When the survivors open small cracks in their vessels, they see only emptiness, a world wiped clean. But this is where our research adds a deeper layer, one missing from modern retellings. Floods do more than erase. They silence memory. Archaeology shows that after major deluges, river collapses, coastline tsunamis, glacial bursts, entire regions go culturally dark. Settlements vanish. Scripts disappear. Traditions reset. It is not just a physical destruction, it is a psychological one. And maybe this is why the flood echoes so loudly across history, why it shaped the cosmologies of Mesopotamia, the rituals of Egypt, the laws and covenants of Abrahamic faiths, the Yuga cycles of India, and even the calendars of the Maya. The flood did not just end an age, it defined the next one. But the long night does not last forever. Eventually, a sound breaks the silence. A thump, a scrape, a shift in the hull, land, or something that feels like it. For the first time since the storm began, the survivors realize the waters are falling, the world is returning, but it will not be the same world. Across the myths of the flood, the waters eventually recede. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, as if the world is exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Inside their vessels, the survivors feel a shift, a tilt, a grinding sound beneath the hull. They have struck something solid. In every culture, this moment marks the same turning point. Humanity touches land again. But not just any land. A mountain. In Sumer, ZIUSUDRA lands upon Mount Nisir, a lone peak rising above the drowned world. In the Babylonian Gilgamesh epic, Utnapishtim's vessel rests upon Mount Nimush. In the Hebrew account, Noah's Ark comes to rest upon the mountains of Ararat, a plural phrasing that hints at a high elevation range, not a single peak. In India, Manu's boat is fastened to the horn of a divine being and brought to the summit of Mount Himavat, the ancestral Himalayas. In Greece, Deucalion's vessel reaches Mount Parnassus, where the new humanity will begin. Different ranges, different continents, different altitudes, same symbol. The mountain is more than a place of landing. It is a threshold, the bridge between the world that died and the one that now waits to be reborn. Mythologists call this the axis mundi, the cosmic spine, the vertical link connecting heaven, earth, and the deep. It is no coincidence that nearly every civilization uses a mountain to mark the rebirth of humanity. High ground is survival. High ground is perspective. High ground is the first dry place after catastrophe. But the ancient stories go further. They say the mountain is where knowledge returns. Sumer says ZIUSUDRA receives life like a god and is taken to dwell in the distant east. In the Akkadian tradition, Utnapishtim is granted immortality, but only after reaching the mountaintop. In Hebrew tradition, the covenant is established. Rules for the new humanity are set. Guidelines for living, for justice, for restraint. In India, after the waters fall, Manu performs a ritual atop the mountain, and from that ritual emerges the seed of the next age. The mountain is where survivors become ancestors, where catastrophe becomes memory, where the world receives its second chance. And yet, across all these stories, the survivors share a similar moment, standing on high ground, looking out across a world they no longer recognize, silent, emptied, erased. It is here, at the edge of desolation, that humanity must answer the question the myths keep asking. What do we do now? The flood has passed. The world is open again. But the greatest transformation has not yet begun. When the survivors step out onto the mountain, they do not step into the world they left behind. They step into something else, a world reset, emptied, waiting. Every flood myth describes this moment not as a return to normalcy, but as the beginning of a new humanity. The Sumerian tablets say, "Kingship was lowered from heaven again." The emphasis is striking. A second beginning, a second descent, a second order. In the Hebrew tradition, a covenant is given, laws, prohibitions, boundaries, as if the first version of humanity lacked something essential. In Hindu cosmology, Manu becomes the progenitor of a new age, one aligned with a fresh cycle of cosmic balance. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulate the earth not through ordinary means, but through ritual, a symbolic act of purification and reconstruction. Different methods, same meaning. Humanity is starting over. But here is the most profound truth embedded in the stories. The flood does not destroy humanity. It edits it. It removes the chaos of the old age. The giants, the tyrants, the long-lived kings, the hybrid beings that blur the line between mortal and divine. The new humanity is smaller, shorter-lived, more fragile, but also more adaptable. Archaeology supports this pattern. After major catastrophic events, human populations tend to reset into simpler, more resilient forms. New tools, new settlements, new social structures. The flood myths preserve this transformation, but in poetic form. A great wiping clean, followed by a deliberate rebuilding. And here the stories reveal something even more surprising. Humanity is not left to rebuild alone. In the Sumerian tradition, the Apkallu return, sages who restore the arts of civilization. In Egypt, Thoth reintroduces writing, order, mathematics. In India, the divine fish guides Manu into establishing laws for the next age. In Greece, Themis instructs Deucalion and Pyrrha on how to repopulate the world. It is as if the ancient world believed, disaster destroys buildings, but it should not destroy knowledge. So the knowledge comes back, through sages, through symbols, through rituals, through memory. This is why nearly every flood myth ends the same way, not with despair, but with renewal. A smaller humanity, a humbled humanity, a humanity that remembers, even if it does not fully understand, that it is the second attempt. And if this version fails, some myths warn there could always be a third. What makes the flood so powerful is not the water, it's the memory. A memory preserved not in one culture, not in one language, but in dozens, separated by oceans, mountain ranges, and thousands of years. How does a story survive like that? Modern scholars offer one answer: archetype, a psychological imprint, a universal human fear. Our species has always lived close to water. Our earliest settlements rose beside rivers and coasts, the same places most vulnerable to disaster. So of course we remember floods. But the flood myths go far beyond fear of drowning. They describe a world before the flood, a crisis that breaks that world, a chosen survivor, a vessel built with secret knowledge, a mountain of rebirth, a second humanity. These are not random story elements. They form a sequence, a structured narrative pattern consistent across continents. And here is where archaeology adds a revelation the ancient scribes never wrote explicitly. Even before the earliest flood layers, cultures across the world were already connected by something. Not by trade routes, not by migrations, but by symbols. Shared motifs appear in places that, as far as we can tell, had no direct contact. The spiral of rebirth, the sacred mountain, the cosmic ocean, the tree bridging worlds, the divine messenger who restores order. The idea that humanity has lived more than one age. It's as if fragments of an older worldview, older than writing, older than agriculture, spread outward long before the flood myths were written down. Echoes, archaeologists call them. And the flood is the loudest echo of all. It serves not just as a memory, but as a symbol, a warning embedded into the mythic architecture of civilization. A warning about imbalance, about excess, about the dangers of forgetting limits. The Mesopotamians say, when humans became too many, the world groaned. The Hebrews say, when violence filled the earth, the waters rose. The Hindus say, when dharma declines, the cycle resets. The Maya say, when creation forgets its purpose, it must be remade. 4 civilizations, 4 interpretations, 1 message. The flood is not just a historical question. It is a philosophical one. What breaks a world? What forces a reset? And how close are we, today, to the edge of another cycle? For if the ancient stories teach anything at all, it is this. Humanity is given more than 1 chance, but never infinite chances. We are the second humanity, and the myths quietly ask, will there be a third? The flood is often treated as a myth, a dramatic tale told by ancient people to explain the world around them. But look closer. The earliest version we have, the Sumerian flood of ZIUSUDRA, is already written in the past tense. Already a memory. Already a story inherited from an even older world. The scribes who carved these tablets did not claim to invent anything. They claimed to be recording something they believed had happened long before their cities rose, long before their kings ruled, long before writing itself existed. A story passed down across generations, carried through ritual, song, symbol, whisper. A story older than temples, older than agriculture, older than history. And when we compare the myths, Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Maya, Aztec, we do not see a single tale copied across cultures. We see a pattern, a memory resurfacing again and again in places that should have had no connection. A world before the waters. A crisis that shook that world. A decision made by forces beyond humanity. A chosen survivor, a vessel designed for the impossible, a mountain of rebirth, a second beginning. These are not the marks of coincidence. They are the fingerprints of something deeper, something humanity refused to forget. Archaeology reveals flood layers. Sediment, sand, silt, scattered across continents, some from tsunamis, some from glacial bursts, some from river collapses, different triggers, different centuries. But to ancient eyes, to minds living through disaster after disaster, it must have felt like the world itself was drowning. And perhaps that is why the myths speak with one voice. This has happened before. A warning embedded in memory. A cycle buried inside cosmology. A story meant not just to explain the past, but to prepare the future. We are the inheritors of that story, the beneficiaries of the second chance it describes, the children of the world that rose after the waters fell. But the flood myths end with a question, quiet, unsettling, unfinished. If humanity has lived more than one age, if civilizations can fall and rise again, if nature does not grant infinite grace, then what exactly keeps us safe from becoming another forgotten layer of silt and silence? The ancient texts do not answer. Instead, they offer a final line, not a conclusion, but a warning. Remember. Remember the world before. Remember the world that broke. Remember the waters that came. Remember the second beginning. For the flood was not just a catastrophe, it was a message. And if a message was preserved this carefully across thousands of years, thousands of miles, and dozens of cultures, then we must ask, what else did they try to tell us? Because if this part of the story was hidden, what comes next may reshape everything we think we know. Every flood myth tries to answer the same question: why did the old world end? But maybe the real question is, why does humanity keep remembering it? Why does this story survive across oceans, deserts, mountains, and millennia? Why does every civilization feel compelled to warn us about a world that grew too loud, too corrupt, too unstable? And why do so many traditions insist that the flood was not the end of the cycle, but the beginning of one? Because if the ancients were right, if this story is a memory rather than a myth, then we are not living after the flood. We are living between floods. And that brings us to what comes next. Because here's the part most people never talk about. After the waters fell, civilization didn't slowly crawl back. In some places, it seems to appear almost overnight. First rituals, then temples, then cities, then kings. As if something, or someone, was guiding the rebuild. So in the next episode, we're going to step into the world after the reset. The first settlements, the first temples, the first rules of the new humanity, and the unanswered question hiding underneath all of it. Why did the earliest monuments of human history look less like homes and more like machines for belief? Why did humans gather to build sacred sites before they built nations? And why do those first temples feel like they were designed to preserve something, not just worship something? If you want the next chapter, the one that begins where the flood ends, then do 3 things right now. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Like this video if you felt that ancient warning land in your chest. And comment one word: after. Because I want to know how many of you are ready to follow the story beyond the waters, into the world that history barely explains. This was the Great Flood, and in the next episode, we're going to find out what humanity built when it had nothing left except memory.